I met an actor, Terry Stone, and he actually told me, he goes, look, my first film he released in 2007, because I spent 1.2 million on advertising. He goes, my last film, Rise of the Foot Soldier 6, he goes, I spent 120K.
Wow.
He goes, and my last film sold more than the first. He goes, because I realize all I now need to do is not put posters on the sides of buses, is actually get onto people's phones.
Definitely.
So it shows the actual real power of social media today.
If we get into any of the, the journey into property development, I want to know more about you. I want to know, where you grew up, what schools you went, some of the courses you did, what it was like growing up, what it was like even the people around you, like your parents, tell us all about it. Start from the beginning.
Okay, start from the beginning. So I'm actually from a migrant family background. So both my parents are from India, so Punjab area of India. They came over in the 1960s.
Okay.
They met, got married. I'm one of 4 siblings. So I grew up in a town called Southall. So it's in West London, not far from Ealing. And it was a predominantly Punjabi migrant background where, my parents were working double shifts, every 5-6 days a week.
Where were your parents working?
So my father was a manual labourer. He's working on roads and stuff. Whereas my mum, she was working for T-Wall, so the sausage manufacturing company. So they were all based locally, but they had to put in that work because they're quite lowly paid jobs. So they had to work sort of double the hours. So I was end up being brought up by my grandma. So an area where I actually saw that my education was actually quite far behind all my peers because, again, you've been brought up in a migrant area. A lot of the children there, their first language at home isn't English. So when you're then put into a background where all the kids' first language is English, you realize that, there's areas to improve. So I focused on a lot of that, went to secondary school in Hillingdon.
Okay. And how was that? Was that in the 80s?
It's in the 80s. So
okay.
There was a lot of discrimination. I think probably a lot of it is because people don't realize when you see someone different, you basically see the elements that are different, but you don't really see the bits that sort of unite everybody. And it's that little bit of fear factor as well. However, when I went to secondary school, there's a little bit more mixed. So you had probably a 10% mixed background and 90% were from a white background. This is where I met my now business partner, Sanjay, at the age of 11.
Wow.
Yeah. So, so I've been friends and best friends with him since then.
And that's a really important point there that you make. So, sorry, how old are you now, Malcolm?
I'm 45 years old.
45. Well, you look really good for 45.
Oh,
I have to say that. So you've had this friendship for about 34 years, and it's someone who you've gone into business with. And I just want to clarify that point. When you go into business with somebody, they've got to be on some sort of level with you, and you've got to be able to sort of know them for a long time. I've never really done a partnership, but during COVID, I did do a small partnership and I opened up a restaurant next to Liverpool Street.
Amazing.
And it took me 9 weeks to get it to £1,000 turnover a day. And we were good on the phone. There were certain other elements that we did together and it went really well. But working together with somebody and, working on the floor, sometimes it can go, could put a lot of pressure on both of you and, end up exploding. And it can be more like hell, having a partner like that. So you've known your partner for like 34 years or so.
That's right, yeah.
And how's the relationship with your partner?
No, it's really good. So it's basically, I think you shouldn't really go into business with someone where you've got similar skills. You want to go into business where someone's skills complement yours. Mm-hmm. So predominantly, I was really good on the back end in terms of just making sure things happen. Sanjay has more the vocal skills, being able to communicate, trying to get sort of deals done. So we then combined those two together when we started working together.
That makes sense. And I always believe 1 and 1 is not 2, it's like 11.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way?
No, 100%. So you need to, if you go into partnership with someone, this is my belief bring, what skills are you going to bring? And I'm going to bring this, you're going to bring this. They should complement. If those skills are overlapping, you're then going to start fighting over bits about what is done right or not.
Carry on.
So yeah, met my business partner, then spent a lot of my secondary school just trying to improve on my skills. You know, I wasn't predicted to pass any GCSEs. By the time I finished, I actually managed to pass 8 at that time.
What did you study at college?
So I studied management studies and history.
Okay.
So it was a new sort of combination of like a GMVQ. Just because I was more interested always in this business aspect of it. Some of my parents obviously had their own businesses. My siblings set up their own businesses that were running, and I wanted to sort of pursue that avenue of it. And I actually doing a master's at Bath University in computer science. So I ended up passing that, and then went straight into a corporate job in 2000.
And was that job what you wanted to do, or purely because the market was doing well in it?
It was only because the market was doing well. Looking back at it now, I regret it.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. I actually do regret it because it wasn't my passion. I pursued it, and I did that for 18 years.
18 years.
18 years. But then I also, during that whole period, what was actually quite important was when I actually did that job, the company had 350 employees in that particular office that I was working in. 9/11 happened. Lastminute.com floated. The shares plummeted. And this company laid off half its workers. And I saw grown men crying, losing their jobs. I'm like, okay, look, do you know what? I need to do something else. So that year, in December 2001, I picked up this auction catalog, went and purchased the property in auction. And that was basically the start of my property journey. And that was a direct result of going into that IT job.
Right. So was you quite savvy with your money when you was working at your IT job? Was you putting money aside?
So I was putting money aside. I was actually, during my university days, I was actually dabbling in .com shares. Nothing too glam. But
Right.
it was just literally just covering the bills and stuff. So I didn't have to borrow money off my parents to pay for my education.
Okay. And so when you got into full-time employment after your master's, what was you, about 24 then or something?
No, I was 22.
22. Wow, that's a great achievement. So you didn't waste any time.
No, time's money.
There you go. Yeah, 100. And yeah, so you started working. Did you know straight away that you had to start budgeting and saving?
I did. I always knew the value of money because we come from a background where we didn't have money. You know, so when you see like your parents working, so long and so hard, and then when they brought their businesses, your parents are up at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
They open a shop at 7. They don't close the shop until 10. And then you go to sleep, and then they start that again, and they do that 7 days a week. You can see the graph they're putting in and you can understand that value of money.
So what sparked? Obviously when people got laid off in your job, what sparked that? There was this thing called property and you could make money there. Like, what gave you that idea? Did you have a mentor or someone?
No, so I'll tell you how it all started. I had no Rightmove or anything. The internet was actually quite new at the time. So I got the Leader newspaper out, flicked to the center section. They used to have a homes page. All the estate agents and stuff would list all their listings for sale and for rent. Had a look at this one page, which was, or at that time, an local auction house, and it had a house for sale for 80,000. I'm like, okay, this is 80,000. That similar house is for sale in the estate agent pages for about 150. I went to auction with my dad, and we purchased that for 120.
Okay.
Then I called a few estate agents over, 3 of them, and they valued the house between 145 and 155.
Okay.
So I said, okay, look, 150 is what it roughly probably is worth.
Yeah.
If I went to sell it. So then I refinanced that at 150. I pulled all my money back out.
Yeah.
Because at that time you could get 90%, 95%, even 85% mortgages and stuff. So I'm like, okay, look, this is amazing. So the next year, then I ended up buying 3. So using the same sort of techniques where you're sort of buying undervalued. So we're not really doing too much refurbishment work because I wasn't too familiar with it at that point. And then literally what I did was throughout my career, probably up until 2010, was just buy, sort of add some value a little bit, like, just get it tenanted, and refinance and then sort of repeat, keep going.
Okay. So, like, what year did you get into property?
So I got into property in 2001.
2001. So that was almost like a decade sort of before I got into properties. So I got in when the crash happened, and then it was kind of bottomed out in 2009, 2010. So I didn't time it perfect, but I just got in at a time where I had money, and I was 21 at the time. And yeah, I just got into onto the property ladder, and it just was the right time. And I just looked at the numbers. I thought, gonna rent for $1,000. My mortgage is 500. There you go, 500. Rent it for 6 months, and I'm covered for the whole year. However, I got in that time. You got in an era before. You must have seen the 2007 full frontal of it. You know, how did that affect things, if anything?
So I'm always quite conservative. Sanjay is quite bullish. So when we were looking at what we were buying, so I was only buying freehold homes. So I learned from my dad that only buy stuff that they no longer make. Don't buy these new build flats. So the properties that I brought were affordable homes for affordable people. When that 2008-9 crash happened, the properties I had weren't really that heavily impacted.
Right.
There may have been a slight decline on them, but where some of these new build flats that people brought in Leeds for 180, they were selling in auction for 80K.
Wow.
You know, that didn't really impact us that much.
How much was you impacted? Because, you know, like you might have bought something, just say for argument's sake, you bought it for 100,000. Like how much was it actually impacted? And another thing people need to know is if you don't sell that asset, then you don't realize a loss, right?
So I look at it this way. You're not really impacting unless you have to sell. So if you have a look at property is like a 10-year cycle. So you tend to have 2-3 years will be double-digit growth during that. The rest of, say, 8-7 years is quite flat. You have a price correction. As long as you look at property as sort of a 5 to 10 year cycle, you're never really going to be impacted. So I tend to fix rates for 5 years. So when these prices were falling or interest rates start to rise, I wasn't really impacted at all. But I think at that time, the property stock that I held, prices probably fell by 10 to 15% in the areas that we were operating. So it did have an impact. However, any loss there, once we were on the way back out, sort of 2011, 2012, they then were sort of, you know, you're well back in the black.
Shooting back up. Okay, and how old was you when you became a millionaire on paper?
I try not to really look at that, but I say by the time 25, you like as probably a paper millionaire. But I try not to get distracted by numbers.
Did that change you?
No, because I still was working. I still driving. At that time, nothing more than average car. Because my aim was, look, everyone can make something on paper, but my aim was to build something bigger. But at that time, at the age of 25, I didn't really know what it was. Also, at the age of 25, I also got married at that age. So there was a lot sort of going on. Yeah. But I just needed to find out what I was going to do in property because I wanted to have an impact. But just buying a few buy-to-lets, you're not really going to have an impact.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you feel that you really need to care about your client?
No, you do.
So the person who's going to live in that house, do you go in and buy a property and go, what's the cheapest way of me just doing this and get someone to get in here? And I don't care if that's like a beer back wall there or something, or it will do for a couple of years. Or what's your insight?
I think I look at property as art. So you have to, if you think it's art, then you want to present it as art. And then I've also got then the other side of my brain is the business side. Okay, how do I make this hard wearing? How do I ensure that, you know, that this will last? I don't have to come in, replace the carpets and stuff. So there's two aspects to it. So one, you want to make it look nice. So if you have a look at some of the properties that we've been producing over the last few years, they look nice, you know, because I want to feel the only two bits I like about a property process is purchasing it, and once it's done, I don't really enjoy the development side of it. It is a byproduct of being a developer.
Yeah,
but it can be disheartening at times, and you're literally firefighting all the time. But that end bit, I turn up and like, actually, do you know what? We've done a good job here. Look,
Nice, nice. So while buying these properties, was you still employed?
So I was still employed. I've had probably about 4 jobs during the time of being employed, and I carried on working because one, my wife said, I always said, look, I want to quit. I'm going to focus on this. She's like, we can do both at the same time. And then I was utilizing Sanjay, who's sort of self-employed within the family business, and he had time to attend viewings and stuff. And I was working a city job where I was in work at 8 o'clock and I didn't really get leave till 6.
Yeah.
So for me to come back to do viewings and stuff was near enough impossible. So majority of the properties that I brought without seeing. So probably 95% of the properties up until that point I've never seen until the day of completion.
So a lot of people ask out there, Malkit, when's the right time to go self-employed?
There's no right time. It's when it's the right time for you.
Do you think that when you're taking that jump, that you've got to have some sort of backup behind you?
I think you need to have income to support you, because if you're starting a business up, it's not going to pay the first 2 years. You might as well just write off, because you're just going to have losses and stuff.
You're gonna the first couple of years you end up feeding the business, right?
Yeah, you feed it. After that, you'll get something coming in, but you have to be consistent and you have to never give up.
But I mean, like, what if somebody goes, "Oh, I bought 1, 2 properties now. I've got $1,000 coming in. My rent's 500 for a room right now, so I've got something coming in. I can just be a property entrepreneur." Do you think that's the way to go? Because don't you need like little deposits, like to build up a cash flow to say, right, all right, I can, I've got enough cash flow for myself by living, at minimal sort of, needs. But do you need a lump sum to invest in your next property to try get some sort of cash flow going on? So like to try uplift another property to try get money back up.
I would just switch it back and look at it the other way. If you go full time, how are you going to now utilize that time to get deals, and how are you going to fund them? I was looking at it, well, I've got my P60s every year. You show that the banks actually see you as less of a risk than someone that doesn't have a portfolio. Build your portfolio up.
Yep.
Because I think it's important for everybody to have some type of side hustle, whether they're an artist or, whether you're a part-time mechanic. You have something, and as you build it up, you build a customer base up, you can then look at, leave with having nothing or something very minimum is a risk. So you have to just, I'm just one of those that would want to sort of balance it out.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Is just always speak to your broker. Your broker is key. They are that pathway to all the market. So if you look at probably the top 4 sort of banks, they will probably not lend to you because they want to see a P60 and stuff. They don't really understand your property portfolio.
Yeah.
However, when you work with more specialist banks, they will then look at basically everything that you have. So I just always liaise with my broker, every deal that we're looking at before we even purchase it. Okay, look, what can we get finance wise? Okay, what are the terms? So on. And that has never changed throughout our whole property journey up until today.
Where do you find a good broker?
Recommendation, just turning up to networking events, having a chat.
Yep.
To be honest, with brokers, solicitors, accountants, what you'll probably find is your first broker is probably not going to be your last one. You end up outgrowing people.
Yes.
Yeah. So my first broker was someone sort of working from home, and he's predominantly just doing residential mortgages, and he have like landlords, maybe up to like 5 properties and stuff. Once you start buying and developing more properties within your property portfolio, you probably need someone then that will have access to a vast array of other lenders, because all of a sudden, as soon as you've got 4 properties, majority of the buy-to-let companies won't lend to you. So now you need to go to the likes of, say, Shawbrook or Lend Invest and so on, and they're only broker, only banks. So it's just one of those. So, and again, with solicitors and stuff, as you now push more transactions through, you need someone that'll be able to keep up with that pipeline of work that you have.
Yeah.